Everybody, welcome back to the Breakthrough Moment podcast. We have Daniel White here, special guest. Super excited to talk to you, mate. Hey, Daniel, welcome.
Zac, thank you so much for having me on. This is going to be a momentous conversation.
Oh, can't wait. I can't wait. Everyone at home, get your notepads and papers ready and pens and all the things, whiteboards, whatever it is. You guys are going to learn a lot today in terms of your own energy and health and wellness. Daniel is one of the co-founders of QNTMLY. He's also one of the co-founders of the CRD Challenge, which stands for Circadian Rhythm Disruption Challenge, which is for anybody who doesn't know anything about circadian rhythm and wants to improve their health in some way, shape, or form. It's a topic that not many people know about, but it's by far one of the most impactful secrets to our health. And so we're going to dive into this. But before we do that, I'd love to know a little bit more about your breakthrough moments, Daniel, and a bit about your career and story. But before I do that, just want to quickly introduce everyone to the podcast. So this is all around sharing successful, entrepreneurs usually, but this is more of, you guys have a foundation and a charity. So it's to share Daniel's breakthrough moments that he's had in his career and life. And as he does that, we can also have breakthroughs at home ourselves. So without further ado, mate, we'd love to know a little bit of your story and some of your breakthrough moments that brought you into this challenge and doing this work.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zac, for giving me the platform to talk about this. And I guess if I give you the TLDR, a little bit of an untraditional podcast in the sense that I don't want to dive, through every moment of my personal history, but I came to this career, I guess, in the last 6 or 7 years working in the health industry as a result of my own personal experiences and my own personal challenges. When I was very young in my youth, around age 12 or 13, I got very, very addicted to video gaming. And so spent the better part of about half a decade, gaining a lot of weight, becoming increasingly unhealthier, both mentally and physically, until I decided there was, a change was needed around the age of 17 or 18. That sent me on a bit of a trajectory, studying psychology at university, then going into nutritional neuroscience for my master's, looking at the connection between food and mood and well-being, falling into the functional medicine area. And for those of your listeners who don't know what that is, it's a slightly more holistic approach to medicine, similar to allopathic medicine in many ways, but really looking at root cause solutions for people's health and well-being. So at this point, I'd kind of gone through the whole gamut of nutrition and training and movement. And then I'd sort of discovered the relaxation element and the meditation and the breath work. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, I stumbled into the world of kind of circadian science, circadian biology, and then more recently, kind of some of the quantum and the quantum physics aspects of our biology and our health and well-being. And it really has been like a journey for me to heal myself, I suppose, in many ways. And about 5 or 6 years ago, when I came back from university, just had this burning desire and passion to go out there and improve the world. I guess I've always been a bit of a 30,000 feet thinker, looking down at society, thinking like, what are the big levers here that we could be moving to have such a massive impact on the future of, humanity, essentially. I guess I've always been thinking in that way. Never really had the opportunity necessarily to have as much of an impact as I do now. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was going through, many challenges throughout my entrepreneurial life as a solopreneur. First of all, finding what it is, what's my gift, what's my service, what am I bringing to the world? And it began in kind of like nutrition and health coaching, and, did a lot of great work and learned a lot and had amazing clients and amazing results. But when I was doing a business accelerator program about 5 years ago, I kind of discovered that, really my origin and, the way in which I could most relate to and resonate with people was in my past and my history. So recognizing that, when I was a teenager, I was so deeply addicted to technology, and maybe the only kid at the time that I knew of. I was like the first kid in the class with the smartphone and, the dial-up broadband, video gaming every night and things like that. But now it's, obviously a lot of children, millions and millions of children all over the world are suffering with all sorts of mental and physical problems as a result of overuse of technology, and the influence that this has on our body clocks and our mental and physical health, on our circadian biology in particular. So about 5 or 6 years ago, that was kind of, it was kind of like the first of several breakthrough moments. And that was where I realized that I really wanted to be working with younger generations as well as, adults. And so I founded a charity and began a kind of 3-year, it was an exciting journey. You could say it was a bit of a slog. performing a research study in schools in Guernsey, where I live, in the Channel Islands in the United Kingdom. We've got a very small population. We often joke around and we call it Test Bed Nation, because there's only a couple of thousand people you can kind of try out some of these weird and wacky ideas on, And I went into 7 schools and we performed a research study where we gave them simple education relating to our circadian rhythms and sleep, and we provided them with some tools, some things called blue light blocking glasses. And so that was kind of like my breakthrough, the standard traditional noise around me that I should just be, this health coach and just jump on the wagon and, enter into this quite saturated market, and finding really like my niche, which was, wanting to improve the future through, how we currently teach younger generations of people. And so that was about a 3-year period, totally bootstrapped, solo fundraising and delivering this big research project, which was an incredible experience, but pretty tough on the soul, to be honest, and especially on the bank account, having to make a lot of side and backward steps in pursuit of, a vision in the future. And then I guess my next big breakthrough moment was about a year ago. I was approached by my now business partners and fellow patrons of our charity. Actually, they had seen me on a podcast with a lady called Sarah Kleiner, who's got a podcast called Evolving Wellness. And my now partners had basically seen that I was doing all this charitable research in schools, and they contacted me and said, look, you're doing all that on your own. That seems pretty onerous. Let us get involved and help you, and let's, scale this and make a business out of this and make a global charity out of this, and, continue this kind of work that you've been doing and these seeds that you've been planting. And so that was probably the biggest breakthrough moment of all, because at that point, I broke through a lot of self-limiters in terms of my mindset, what I believed I was capable of and what I was doing. It also broke me through a lot of kind of glass ceilings around what I actually was capable of doing because of limited resources, including time and finances and such like that. And that really kind of paved the way for the trajectory now, leading up to the CRD challenge, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit.
Amazing. What a journey it's been, and it's only really just getting started, I'm sure, with this next amazing chapter that you guys are in. I just like a couple of points there in terms of, you've started, this is now you're part of a charity and a foundation that's really, creating this incredible educational platform for people to be educated on what this is all about. There's other people out there who've always maybe thought about, I want to start a charity, or I want to start a foundation. I want to kind of go out there and change the world. Do you have any advice for them who are wanting to have a breakthrough at all? I'm sure there's a few pieces of knowledge you could impart.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I can't speak for everybody and every process, but I can only speak to my experiences. I believe I was successful in doing what I set out to do because I cared about it more than I cared about anything else. I cared about it more than I cared about, my own health at times, and, my income and my stature and, a lot of typical markers of progress. So I really had to act every day with like a vision of the future in mind. It took a lot of faith. It took a lot of perseverance. It took a lot of belief and determinism, to sit and, when things were going well and when things weren't going that well with limited resources, to really know that was the path. But I felt very called to do it and very called to create a vision for a better future. And if you do feel called and you have that passion, don't sit on it, because I genuinely believe that, when we begin to take action around these collective possibilities, then, unseen forces come to guide us and aid us on that quest. So, usually if what you're doing is sincere and is wanting to contribute towards, creating better outcomes for people in their everyday lives, it's a really, really good place to start. I would say to people though, the best thing that you can do is take advice from people who have been there before you, get other people involved, even if it's in small ways that people might contribute their skills or knowledge or experience towards you. It can probably make things a little bit easier. I probably wouldn't go about it in the same way that I did. If I did it again, I would have, more advisors, or I'd have more volunteers, or I would look for more support. Having said that, because I didn't necessarily have the experience of having done it before, I wasn't really sure what was going to be needed and necessary. So I couldn't have predicted at that time that I would have needed all the support that I did. But yeah, it's definitely worthwhile that if you can, articulate your vision, what you're trying to achieve, quite often you will spark inspiration in other people who have common values and common aims and goals. So the sooner that you can like articulate that, the sooner that you can create momentum and community, which is ultimately where we've landed now, right? Community around this shared goal, which obviously allows you to achieve it easier, faster, in a more enjoyable way. That's what I would recommend is, start at community. Don't end at it like I have.
100% a calling. It's all about having the calling, hey, and tapping into that. Have you always been quite philanthropic and wanting to contribute, or was there a moment in your life that made that shift for you? Is this just in your nature, do you feel? Or
yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I've done lots of self-exploration over the years, and one of the really interesting tools that I used when I was studying functional medicine was something called the VIA Institute Character Strength Survey. And so it like looks at these 21 different kind of domains or virtues. It's not like your introvert, extrovert sort of thing, but it looks at these different strengths which have been common across like many cultures, modern and ancient. And it kind of asks you a variety of questions. And what I discovered is that, according to the survey, some of my kind of key strengths were kindness, fairness, perspective, judgment, and social intelligence. So really like understanding the needs of other people, like looking, kind of zooming out and having perspective over society and the world, and trying to like, apply more fairness and like, deliberate judgment to, the way in which we can grow and expand and move and shift, things about societies and our cultures. And so I guess it's always been deeply embedded within me in a sense, but, it most certainly wasn't always something that I was acting upon. I guess I always had these ideas in my mind, but it wasn't until I had personal experiences where my life was quite radically transformed, initially through stopping playing video gaming and getting into health and fitness, and exercise and nutrition. But that came with a lot of its, downsides, sort of obsessive compulsive behaviors and calorie counting and spending a lot of time indoors, ticking boxes essentially for my sense of self and my health and well-being. But it wasn't really until I discovered like the circadian and the quantum biology, especially, the impacts of light exposure, our environment, kind of was like the missing pieces to my health puzzle. And so that impacted me so profoundly that I guess that the lurking philanthropist in me, you might call it, kind of met this intervention, if you want, or like, this experience where I really felt like I could magnify what had impacted me out into broader society. And so those kind of viewpoints of, considering the larger context of life, met this weapon or this tool for like how I could have an impact. And that's when it kind of really all blew up together.
Ooh, I can totally relate. I was a massive gamer growing up and used to play 16 hours a day and wag school just to play my games online. Like it was, but they say gamers have a part of their brain developed that those who haven't gamed don't, which is that problem solving ability. So it looks like with what you mentioned, the intervention of light therapy and understanding that, coupled with your desire to help people and health and wellness, was a missing component or piece of the puzzle that maybe you hadn't found before, which was definitely for me. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so obvious and so amazing. Why haven't I thought about this before? But it's hidden in plain sight, so to speak. I think the other thing that I really respect about you, and sounds like your team's the same, is that you guys are creating change now, and regardless of the sacrifices, the health and wealth, relationships, the things that you've, probably going or put on hold or you're limited by, to then still contribute is really admirable. So thank you so much for doing this. I want to know if you could, just one more question before we get into the challenge, if you could go back in time and change one thing before you started this journey, what would that one thing be?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. People often ask me that. They say, would you take back the video gaming? Would you not do the gaming and stuff like that? And I say to them, like, no, like strangely paradoxically, and I'm sure you experienced this as a gamer, like, my relational skills were very well developed at a very young age because I was playing, massive multiplayer online worlds with people from all over the globe, spending more time there than I was anywhere else. So I developed like quite a lot of skills quite early. What would I change about things? Yeah, I would just try not to do it all so alone. I would become better at articulating, and I couldn't have at the time, so in essence, I couldn't have changed much. But, I would spend more time trying to communicate with other people what it is that I see that's good in the world, and bring more people online and, on board with that mission earlier. Not because I wanted it necessarily to be easier for me, right? Because I just kind of like grin my teeth and bear it is what I did for a lot of years, and I made it work. Thankfully, I had a lot of support from family and, various other pieces, and everything kind of fell into place as it was meant to at every moment. But looking back now, I made things a lot harder for myself than it had to be by really going it alone. So, I think there's this idea in the world that, a strong solopreneur, you should be able to do it and carry the vision and everything. But maybe, I guess you have to ask yourself, how big is your vision? And is it the sort of vision that, can be held alone? Or is it something that the sooner you involve a collective of people and community around, the better?
What perfect segue into from vision. Without light, we have no vision. And so I'd love to know, for everyone at home, if you can help just to educate the CRD challenge, why is it important? And when is it? How can we join? I'd love to just get a bit of a context for everyone, and then we can dive deep.
Yeah, sure. So I guess we'll begin with like the definition. So what is CRD? So CRD stands for Circadian Rhythm Disruption. And why a challenge around that? About 10 years ago, I don't know if you remember the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge.
Yeah.
You got people all over the world, right, dunking buckets of ice on their head. Obviously, that was a fun challenge, right? Didn't require, too much apart from the sheer grit and will to pour ice over your head and maybe make a little bit of a donation or a pledge to charity. But we took inspiration from this, viral social media phenomenon as a way of raising awareness and education and raising funds for a charity concept. So I think that the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, they did about 150 million or something for ALS research. And whilst that's super important and obviously is an incredible feat, when we started to think about it, ALS probably impacts about 0.09% or 0.009% of the population. And then we started to think about this idea and this concept of circadian rhythm disruption. So throughout the past, all the decades that you and I and probably most of the people watching this podcast have been alive, we've had this very traditional, conventional medical model that looks at symptoms and it looks at diseases and treating those symptoms and diseases. And I think more and more people have begun to wake up to the fact that especially chronic disease, so non-communicable disease, things like obesity, diabetes, heart conditions, concerns, a lot of mental health conditions, autoimmune, related conditions, and many other, aspects of what goes wrong for human beings are actually best tended to through lifestyle changes, through diet changes. And, there's a growing appreciation in the world, I think, of the, and this word can be quite loaded, right? The holistic nature of human beings, and that the whole, pill for an ill culture around the pharmaceutical industry and, doctors being stretched to the point at which, they got 5 or 10 minutes to have a consultation with you when you go and see your general practitioner or your medical doctor or whatever it is, wherever you are in the world. And that model is quite unsustainable, I guess. And it's very centralized. And it really puts the power in the hands of physicians, and it disempowers, people who are using that system, because they, fundamentally have been kind of conditioned to believe that, the resolution of their symptoms comes from, a pill or a procedure or something like that. And that, our DNA and our genetics and, our family history is more likely to dictate, the future of our health than our behavior and our lifestyle choices. And it's, quite a fundamental shift to go from, empowerment being in the hands of a medical professional to feeling empowered ourselves. And that comes with a lot of chaos, oh, well, where do I buy my food then? What is healthy food? What isn't healthy food? What's good exercise? What isn't? How should I be relaxing and unwinding? And, there's a lot of fusion out there in the holistic kind of medical space, right? And there's a lot of distrust of people that are moving on from this kind of conventional centralized system into wanting to explore taking care of themselves better. Who do they learn about that from? What do they learn about? What do they prioritize? And that shift has been happening really gradually, I think, over the last 20 years, at least where I am in the UK, right? In places like Australia, I think is probably been, in some ways, a little bit, ahead of the game, at least in some pockets and areas of society, and the same with America and places like that. But one of these areas that is really still very contemporary and new is this idea of our circadian rhythms. Now, what are circadian rhythms? If you dissect the word circadian, it comes from the Latin. Circa is approximately, and DM means a day. So it's a rhythm that spans approximately a day, better known as our internal body clock, right? So what has come to light in the last, decade or two, especially in the medical literature, I think it's been known about for a long time, but there's been an explosion in research around it, is this idea that, within every cell, every system, every organ of our body are these small timing mechanisms, these clocks that govern how our physiology and our biology function. And really that's as a result of our evolution in contact with the planet and our environment. And you've got to imagine that for 99.9% of the time that we've existed as a species on planet Earth, we lived outdoors, we were connected to nature all the time, we lived as tribes, hunter-gatherers or agriculturalists or whatever. And it's really a drop of water in the ocean, the amount of time that we've been living now in these giant, societies, millions of people, some cities literally with millions of people in, so much technology, so much light, so much, growth and evolution in those areas. But there are a lot of challenges that have presented themselves in terms of, our health in relation to the environments in which we're meant to evolve, right? So one of the biggest factors, and some of your viewers and listeners might have heard about it, is the influence of light exposure. So, this is one of the things that we're going to be teaching about in this kind of short 21-day mini learning journey, is the influence that like natural and artificial light have on our body clocks and our rhythms, and then downstream the effect that has on all aspects of our mental and our physical health. And so a lot of people have cottoned on to this, area of health, this circadian rhythms. But a lot of people feel quite overwhelmed by the information. There's new research coming out all the time. There's publications, you're seeing it, even in mainstream television broadcasts. Oh, is, artificial light giving you cancer? Is it increasing your risk of dementia? There's all of these blanket kind of fear-based statements now arriving in the mass consciousness around health and well-being. And what we wanted to do was really identify and acknowledge the fact that, if you live in the modern world, 100% of people are subject to potential disruption of their, body clocks as a result of no longer living in nature. I say, when I'm in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. And so people can learn about the contraindications and like safe and effective ways to live in the modern world without having your biology and your body massively disrupted. Now, a lot of people, they do everything, they count the calories, they go to the gym, they exercise, they work hard, they've got responsibilities, family, loved ones, businesses, all of this stuff. But if they're not keeping themselves and their body clocks well regulated and healthy, they're kind of fighting and pushing an uphill battle. And one of the things that I recognized is that, when I first started to learn this stuff, I really had no community, I had no people to ask questions, there was no playbook. It's a big word we use in the business realm. There's no playbook as how to apply, this new science, fundamental science, like some of the most basic foundational stuff that, human beings have been living within that paradigm throughout the whole of evolution, natural light, time spent in contact with nature, an absence of technology. And now we've been thrust into this, modern technological world, and we're not quite sure and aware of how it's impacting us. So we developed the CRD challenge as this 21-day learning journey that someone could come in, knowing absolutely nothing about these topics whatsoever, but just having an interest or an ambition to improve their health or the health of their families, or, their performance in their business or their teams or their schools or their community or, whatever. And they could join a group of like-minded individuals and be kind of like led on the journey to improving, or at least beginning to learn about this stuff. And so we took inspiration from the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, because we wanted to challenge people with something that could go kind of viral quite quickly, that you can involve your friends, your family members, your co-workers in, and that would really begin as like paving the way for a more mass adoption of this understanding and knowledge in society, which could then, influence educational policy, how we, build our communities, our schools, our hospitals, how we set up our homes, how we treat people in workplaces, organizations, all of those sorts of things, a kind of ripple effect that we could put out into the universe, as it were. So our charity, the QNTMLY Foundation, partnered up with our organization, which is called QNTMLY, and we're delivering this massive challenge. We've kind of developed this huge ambassador network that have been helping us to spread the good news. We've got a couple of thousand people signed up so far in about a week, a week since our launch. So we're really excited about it. And I guess one of the things that I'm most excited about is this idea that, in the world, we have a lot of challenges, right? If you're an entrepreneur, for example, you know that you have problems within business, right? You have, we can call them problems, we can call them challenges, things to overcome. And it's no different in any other area of the world, whether it's climate change or financial challenges or health challenges or spiritual challenges or, whatever. We all have mountains to climb. And those mountains, are made easier to climb when we have good circadian health, when our bodies are in rhythm and are in sync with nature and our biology and our physiology is operating, per the program that we were born on this planet with. And unfortunately, not a lot of people know about that and pay kind of homage to that. And so their lives and their attempts to solve many incredible challenges around the world are just made that a little bit harder by not being, full of energy and life and resources themselves. So our attempt is to kind of pay back to everybody by improving the way that we all live our lives.
Well said. Far out. Okay, guys, everyone at home, this is such an important topic. As you mentioned, yeah, I guess relating to people in business, but anyone that's alive, this is a topic and a piece of the puzzle that's not spoken about, as you mentioned, but you guys are bringing it to the world in a way that's digestible. And some of the videos and the promo stuff that you guys have put out is super exciting. And it looks like one of the best ways to learn about this topic, which quantum biology or circadian rhythm, they're not topics that people really talk about or even can pronounce half the time. So this is awesome. And 1,000 people registered. How many people do you think will be registered by the end of the challenge?
We have no idea, really. So the idea is that at this stage, we've got an ambassador network that's been putting it out. And so we're finding more and more people who are what I'm calling circadian curious at this point. Like you say, you don't have to understand the vernacular or the terminology. There's words in the circadian dictionary that took me years to pronounce. But we're really, bringing that down to an everyday person. We like to say that at the minute, I think if you ran the stats on it, probably about 1% of the world have heard of some of these topics and things that we're talking about. And so we want to really bring it to that other 99%. And so, how many people will participate? I see us having at least a few thousand by the time that we go to launch on the 20th of October, which is when we launch the 3-week journey itself. But at that point, we essentially have thousands of ambassadors, people who we know will have their lives changed, energy levels will improve, symptoms will decrease, families will become more cohesive, people will become more productive and develop a greater appreciation and reverence for these kind of aspects of health and well-being. And we have no idea that, and no doubt that by that point it will, begin to spread like wildfire. So what we'd like to think is that, hundreds of thousands of people over the next year and years to come, if not millions, will get an opportunity to learn about these topics, maybe not directly through us, but as a result of the seeds that we're planting here to really spread awareness and, spread curiosity, I guess.
But Daniel, I eat healthy, I go to the gym, I have my blood tests every year, I'm healthy. Why do I need to worry about this circadian thing, this light stuff? I watch my television at night, I sleep well, and get up and go to the gym. I'm healthy. Why do I need this stuff?
So let's imagine, just dial it back for a second. You spend a lot of time focusing on your health and your well-being, or you don't spend a lot of time focusing on your health and well-being, right? You could be the other side. You're there oh, Daniel, I'm so busy. I've got a kid, 5 kids, business to run and all these other things. And what I really love about the things that we're teaching around circadian and quantum health, in fact, let's just call it circadian health, right? Because it's simpler. The ways in which you can manage your body clock for better performance, just for more energy, better sleep, better mental clarity and focus, which applies to all these areas of life, right? Even if you don't exercise, you want to have better mental focus and clarity so that you can deal with that, overwhelming to-do list. If you're already on top of your exercise and your nutrition and your health, you obviously care about improving better. So you can improve even better with really, really simple, small, low-hanging fruit changes. I wouldn't, let go of any of the practices that I have now around my circadian health. In fact, they probably come before sometimes my exercise and the other things that I do for myself, because I understand that fundamentally such small changes to how I live in terms of my environment, how I work, where I spend my time, the light in that environment, how I structure my days. These are all things that we can all look at and honestly, kind of review. Like the simple changes that we're suggesting, the simple changes that I've made, that no doubt you've made, Zac, they've had such a profound impact on my life that there are no other areas that have provided such a high return on investment. The amount of energy that I had to put in to either learn, and maybe that's not true because I spent way too long trying to learn on my own, digging through the emerging science, which is not what we're advocating that people do. We're saying come and get involved in a community, in a place where you can learn that, as quick as you turn on or off a switch, really. But, the return on investment that I've had from those small changes has been so profound and so much greater than a lot of the effort I put into looking after myself and my business in other areas, that there is really nothing to lose, is what I say to people. You got everything to gain, whether that's another 10% on your already productive life, or, just, 10% more energy to get yourself through the difficulties that you're currently facing. Everyone can really make huge gains in terms of energy, vitality, relationships, business, health, just from applying a few simple kind of practices.
For sure. I think what I'm really curious to ask is, why isn't this known by more people? If it's such an important component and key to our wellness, why don't more people know about it?
Yeah, it's very interesting, so why don't more people know about it? When you look back, I think, through disciplines of and the arts, right? Because quite often it is an art of healing. You look to a naturopathy, for example, or you look to different systems of medical care, like the ancient Greeks, Hippocrates, the father of Western medicine, traditional healers from cultures, Chinese medicine, Peruvian shamanism, and less kind of out there. Some people see that as kind of out there woo-woo stuff. This reverence and this appreciation for nature have always existed, right? And I felt like they didn't really need to be taught because it was just second nature. You didn't need to be taught about spending time outdoors because you lived outdoors. No one worked inside. We didn't have, factories. There was no industrial revolution. There was no indoor lighting, no computers, no laptops, televisions, smartphones. There was nothing that kept us inside apart from, maybe where you laid your head to rest at night. And now I think it's very interesting that, the medical literature is exploding in reference to circadian rhythms, and even some of the slightly more intricate topics, which, we won't talk about today, but how physics influences health and light and, all of those kind of quantum biology, you might collect that up as topics. The interesting thing, I think, for me has been that, as soon as industries started to develop devices, for example, that could, support you on your quest, there's been an explosion in, finances or resources put towards research and education and such like that. But for such a long time, there was no money in studying this stuff. You can't make a pill out of sunlight, or, you can't paint and, not using lights in the evening and switching over to candles or different colored lights, or, using free screen filters on your laptops or mobile phones or blue light blocking glasses. It doesn't fit the traditional narrative and paradigm that we have in the West, especially the West, around medical treatments and medicine being a business, But ironically, it is one of the most foundational and kind of curative elements of medicine. So within every other traditional concept, Hippocrates would first say, go and be with nature. If you have a nature deficiency, if you spend all your time indoors, go back and be in the environment in which you evolved and that you're meant to thrive. Whereas we're only really just beginning to understand that now, especially because culturally, we've shifted towards these huge societies. Essentially, so much of what we've built has been contraindicative of good health. So we're now having to look at these systems that we developed as cultures and societies and, appraise them and start to realize that they haven't all been exactly what they've cracked up to be. So I think there's a bit of a bitter pill to swallow for a lot of people, especially a lot of those who have led us into these revolutions of technology and advancement and all this sort of stuff. And there's so much money involved in keeping those industries going. And now I'm not saying for any, I'm not about to put a tinfoil hat on and tell us that we should be throwing our smartphones out, or, you know, never using the internet again, or beware of the 5G frequencies. You know, a lot of people take that stuff far too far. But I think, you know, what's true is that things aren't always working for us in modern society. And so we need to be able to reappraise them. And that takes a little bit of time. You know, it takes a lot of guts for people to say, oh, we kind of got this a bit wrong, or, you know, we need to look at this again. And thankfully now the science is exploding around this quite quickly. And I think, truth be told, you know, people are exhausted of trying to find answers in places that they're not, you know, successful. So thankfully this is like a re-emergence, right, of our roots, of our appreciation for how we evolved. And like, you know, evolutionary biology always seems to win with us human beings. So it's nice to see people coming back around to it.
That's it. Truth will always prevail, right? And these quick fixes or fads and supplements and diets and things, at the end of the day, if we strip all the stuff back, most of it back, we come back to the core basics. It is simple and not so easy in our lifestyle and in the environments, but it's incredibly effective if we just go back to the basics. So that's really interesting. For me, when I first started learning about this stuff, I just started doing TV presenting, and I used to do live television stuff. So I used to get like anxiety of actually presenting it for live audience, you know, to thousands of whatever it was in Australia. And I just started learning about this biology stuff, this circadian biology. And I learned that if I could get myself into a good cycle, then potentially my anxiety would come down. And so I was like, I'll do whatever it takes. I'm going to try this out. So I was getting up at sunrise and, you know, putting the blue blockers on at night and getting to bed at night really, really early. I had no social life, right? Like, it changed a lot of my lifestyle, to be honest with you. My flatmates would get home and I'd be cooking in the kitchen with no lights on. They're like, how are you cooking? There's no lights on in here. Why is there no lights on? Anyway, so I started doing probably similar, I'm assuming some of these light hygiene kind of recommendations that you guys might teach in the challenge. And my anxiety disappeared and I felt amazing. And I was like, why haven't I implemented these changes earlier? It would have helped me in so many different ways. And so, you know, I'm super excited. What can people expect through the challenge? I know you don't want to give away too much, but what is it that you guys will be covering?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we were in this place where they're like, yeah, no, let's keep it like all under wraps and let's not talk too much about what people learn. But I think, you know, as the weeks have gone on, I've realized that people, like, they want to have some sort of expectation, right, you know, of what they're going to be finding out about. And the truth is that, like, you know, if you really lean into like all of the best circadian health practices, it can like dislocate you from your friendships a little bit. It can dislocate you from society, because if you're not out late at night, you know, staring into lights and being entertained and out doing all those things that maybe you've been doing for decades, you know, what else are you going to be doing instead? And what I like to say to people is that, you know, it's about a gradual shift in appreciation, right? You know, we don't expect people to completely change their lives here, but what we can do is offer a bit of understanding about, you know, how the light around your home, the light in your schools, your hospitals, your offices, public places, how that might be influencing your biology in the evenings. What impact that might be having on your sleep, your energy, your mood, anxiety, depression, you know, a lot of these challenges that we face sometimes seasonally. And then a bit of an appreciation of like, you know, well, like what's the sun about? Like, what's the sun here to give us, you know, and what benefits are there to practicing safe exposure to the sun and the different types of light that the sun, you know, provides us? And, you know, what are some of these really simple changes in our daily routines, essentially, that we can make so that we can optimize how our body functions based on receiving certain signals that it's supposed to expect, you know, throughout thousands of years of evolution from the environment. So it's not anything crazy, you know, we're not going to be telling people to throw their phones and laptops out the window and stuff like that, but it's just a bit of an appreciation for how, you know, we can use technology in safer ways, in ways that allow us to function optimally as humans, and also like how we can reconnect with nature and what the benefits are to that, whether it's, you know, natural light or whether it's getting out, you know, on the beach, in the park, in the back garden, grounding and earthing ourselves. We talk a lot about like the medical and the scientific basis for like the re-emerging science of grounding, and as well as, like I said, you know, a lot of stuff about light exposure and how artificial light at night in particular, you know, can have such a detrimental effect on us. And like I said, it's not about necessarily giving up your favorite hobbies. And, you know, I still play some video games every now and again, but I'm very careful about, you know, how I set up my environment, especially in terms of my light, my screens, what filters I might be using to make sure that the sort of light coming out of my screens isn't keeping me awake too late at night. It's not stimulating me, overstressing me, leading me towards burnout and being exhausted all the time, because quite frankly, modern technology is set up for efficiency and, engagement. It's not necessarily designed to keep us healthy. But that doesn't mean that, with a little bit of foresight and knowledge, that we can't, have healthier relationships with the indoors and the outside. So really, that's a lot of what we're teaching people.
So good. So good. What would be the main message you'd really like people to take away from today's podcast?
Yeah, I guess the main message I'd like people to take away is that in a world that is very confusing sometimes when it comes to health and well-being, we're always trying to be sold something, some new concepts, some new supplements, a new diet. Have you seen this fad? Have you fallen into this thing yet? Have you tried and tested this? I just ask people to kind of step back and kind of tune into themselves and understand that whilst a lot of that stuff is helpful, human beings evolved in a very certain way on planet Earth. And if we're not appreciating and respecting the fundamentals of what it means to be a human in terms of the environment in which we live, a lot of this stuff being circadian, food that we eat, the movement, all of these sorts of things. And then there's no point in really chasing shiny baubles on trees that are, promising us massive change if we're not paying attention to the roots of the tree and, how we're feeding it and how we're structuring it. So we created the CRD challenge as a gift to the world, right? We're not asking anything of anyone for participating in this thing, because we wanted to show people that, a lot of the best things for our health and well-being are largely free. And so we wanted to provide that to people. So if you're at all curious, I guess, in improving your health and well-being or your life, how you perform, how you show up in life, and you haven't learned anything about circadian biology, we'd like to think that our invitation stands that, we might be a point of contact for you to come and be curious and learn more.
So cool. So cool. You mentioned earlier the importance of vision and articulating the message and, having a community behind you. If you were to articulate and envision the world in 10 years or 50 years, right? I know one of your big passions is educating the next generation and helping them, because I guess there's many challenges that they have in the world today that we never had. So what does the vision look like? What is that? Paint us the vision for what you guys see the world as.
Yeah, sure. I love talking about this. So really, I began asking myself and at the team, we began reflecting on this idea of, how different could our world be if everybody lived in rhythm with nature? Okay, because a lot of these challenges that we face, whether it's anxiety or depression or, gaining weight or having any issues really with mental and physical health, a lot of them are in some part caused by our disconnection from living in rhythm. Okay, so if you look at healthcare costs, if you look at social issues, if you look at all of the challenges that we face, how differently might we approach all of these things if we knew that, we needed to maintain this relationship with the planet on which we live. A lot of environmental causes these days, climate change and climate destruction and all of these sorts of things. We ask ourselves, how different would the world be if we all had a better appreciation for the benefits that nature has to bring for our health? So I guess, the future vision for us is a world in which people are living in rhythm and they're best equipped to not only solve the challenges we face, but just to celebrate what it means to be human, to bring their unique gifts to the world, and to, provide them to their communities, however large or small around the world, many millions, if not billions of micro communities that exist on this planet, with people who are able to, share their gifts because they're living healthier, happier, and in rhythm with, the very forces that created us.
Love it. I love it. And at the end of the day, there's nothing worse than dancing out of rhythm in life. So why not get in rhythm? So how can people get in touch and get connected to the challenge, Daniel? It's the best way.
Really great question. So we're the best place to go is the website. So it's thecrdchallenge.com. We're also at the CRD Challenge on Facebook, on Instagram. We're also on Twitter. But if people want to come and sign up, what they essentially need to do is go onto the website. They'll see, you mentioned earlier, some of our might call them advertising or, spreading the message assets. They'll see our little call to action video on there and recorded with some of the world leaders that we interviewed on these topics and created something that helps to maybe tell the story in pictures and emotions. So come and take a look at that on the main website and then sign up there. And then you have to register for our school community, which, as I said, is, nearing, we've had about 1,500 people who have submitted forms on the website, and people are slowly converting over to the community where the education will take place.
So good. Appreciate it, Daniel. I'm excited. We've got a few weeks left. So if you guys are out there listening, join the challenge, become an ambassador, share it out. It's free. And this will be some education that some people would go their whole lives and have no idea about, but you guys are getting some bite-sized pieces of education over 21 days. Is that right? It's 3 weeks?
Yeah. 21 days. And I'll also add that it's, we're launching on the 20th of October because I think for our first reveal, we want to be able to do it as a paced community together and support each other on that mission. But the challenge will be going evergreen after that as well. So even if you're listening back to this podcast in 6 months' time, in 12 months' time, or whenever you're finding it, you'll always be able to come and take part in the CRD challenge.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate your time, appreciate your efforts. Those late nights that you're staying up or getting up early and going against your circadian biology to make this happen. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Zach. There's definitely been a little bit of that in service of the mission.